A single silver dollar was all that stood between a young woman's death and the life she never believed she would live. As the noose tightened around her neck and the crowd waited in silence, one lonely rancher stepped forward and calmly said, "I'll pay the dollar." No one understood why a stranger would risk his reputation for a woman the whole town had already condemned. But what happened after that single act of kindness would change two broken lives forever. Stay until the very end, because this unforgettable Wild West story proves that sometimes the smallest price can buy the greatest miracle. And if you love emotional stories of courage, compassion, and second chances, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more heartwarming Wild West tales. The summer sun burned high over the dusty frontier town of Red Creek in the year 1885. Horses shifted nervously beside hitching posts, while townsfolk crowded around the old oak tree in the center of the square. Whispered conversations mixed with nervous laughter as everyone waited for the sheriff to carry out a punishment that many secretly believed was too cruel. In the middle of the gathering stood a young woman with her wrists tied tightly in front of her. A rough burlap hood covered most of her face, hiding her tears from the people who had already judged her. Her once white dress was stained with dust, dried mud, and the marks of days spent in a cold jail cell. She no longer begged for justice because no one had listened. She no longer cried because she had no tears left. Instead, she whispered only 4 heartbreaking words. "Please, end this." Many believed she had stolen money from the wealthy merchant who employed her. Others claimed she had attacked him while trying to escape. The merchant's friends loudly demanded punishment before any proper investigation could be completed. In a town where powerful men controlled nearly every decision, few dared question the accusations. The frightened young woman had no family, no lawyer, and no one willing to defend her. To the crowd, she was already guilty. Standing quietly near the edge of the square was Nathan Hale, a rancher known across the valley for speaking little and working harder than anyone else. He had lived alone for nearly 10 years after losing both his wife and infant son to a terrible fever. Since then, the silence inside his ranch house had become heavier with every passing season. Most evenings he ate supper alone, listening only to the wind moving across empty fields. He had long accepted that loneliness would remain his only companion. Nathan watched the young woman's trembling shoulders and noticed something no one else seemed willing to see. She wasn't angry. She wasn't dangerous. She looked completely defeated. Her quiet plea wasn't the voice of a criminal. It was the voice of someone who had simply lost all hope. The sheriff adjusted the rope and announced that anyone wishing to claim responsibility for the prisoner could purchase her freedom. Before the sentence was carried out, it was an old frontier custom rarely used anymore. The price was almost symbolic, just 1 silver dollar, but whoever paid accepted full responsibility for the prisoner's future. The crowd laughed because everyone knew no one would volunteer. Nathan slowly reached into his worn leather pocket. He pulled out a single silver dollar. Every conversation stopped. Without raising his voice, he walked through the crowd until he stood beside the sheriff. Placing the coin into the man's hand, Nathan spoke words that echoed across the silent town. "I'll take responsibility." The merchant exploded with anger. "You're throwing your life away for a thief." Nathan looked directly at him. "Then prove she is one." No one answered. The sheriff studied the rancher's steady eyes before quietly cutting the ropes from the young woman's wrists. As the hood slipped away, she blinked against the sunlight. Tears rolled silently down her face, not from fear anymore, but from complete disbelief. She stared at the stranger who had paid only $1, yet had somehow given her something worth far more: hope. Nathan said very little as they rode away from Red Creek. The young woman sat quietly behind him on the wagon, expecting questions, suspicion, or demands in return for her freedom. Instead, the lonely rancher simply handed her a blanket when the evening air turned cold and stopped beside a stream so she could wash the dust from her face. It was the first act of simple kindness anyone had shown her in years. When they reached his small ranch before sunset, Nathan opened the front door and said gently, "You'll find no chains here. Stay as long as you need. If you wish to leave someday, I'll never stop you." She stared at him in disbelief. Freedom felt unfamiliar after so much fear. The following days were quiet but peaceful. She introduced herself as Clara, though she admitted she had almost forgotten what it felt like to hear someone say her name with kindness. Nathan never questioned her past. Instead, he trusted her with everyday tasks around the ranch. Clara cooked simple meals, swept the porch, fed the chickens, and slowly filled the once silent house with warmth. For the first time in many years, laughter returned to the old farmhouse. Nathan found himself smiling at little things: a fresh loaf of bread cooling on the table, flowers Clara placed beside the window, or hearing her softly hum while preparing supper. One evening, Clara finally gathered the courage to tell him the truth. She had never stolen a penny. The wealthy merchant had tried to force her into marriage, and when she refused, he accused her of theft to destroy her reputation. With no family to defend her, the town believed his lies without question. Nathan listened carefully but never interrupted. When she finished, he simply nodded and said, "I believed your eyes before I ever heard your story." Those words broke the last wall around Clara's heart. Tears filled her eyes as she realized someone had trusted her without asking for proof. Soon the ranch became more than a place to hide. It became a place where both lonely souls began to heal. Nathan no longer came home to silence, and Clara no longer woke each morning afraid of what the day might bring. Together they discovered that sometimes the greatest rescue is not saving someone's life. It is giving them a reason to truly live. Months passed, and the little ranch that had once been filled with silence became a place of peace, laughter, and hope. Clara no longer carried fear in her eyes. The woman who had once whispered, "Please, end this," now greeted every sunrise with gratitude. She worked beside Nathan in the fields, cared for the animals, baked fresh bread, and slowly turned the lonely farmhouse into a warm and welcoming home. Nathan often caught himself smiling at the simple joy of sharing supper with someone who truly cared. Neither of them had expected love, yet it quietly grew through kindness, trust, and the ordinary moments they shared each day. One afternoon, news spread that the merchant who had falsely accused Clara had finally been exposed. A traveling witness arrived in Red Creek and revealed the truth, that the merchant had lied to cover his own crimes. The townspeople were ashamed. The same crowd that had once stood silently waiting for Clara's execution now came to Nathan's ranch asking for forgiveness. Clara looked toward Nathan, unsure how to respond. He gently squeezed her hand and said, "Bitterness keeps old wounds alive. Mercy lets them heal." Instead of seeking revenge, Clara forgave those who had wronged her, proving that her heart was far stronger than the hatred she had endured. As autumn painted the valley in shades of gold, Nathan stood with Clara beneath the same wide western sky that had witnessed her rescue months before. This time there were no ropes, no frightened whispers, and no crowd demanding punishment. There was only peace. Nathan took her hand and quietly asked, "Would you stay here? Not because you owe me anything, but because this feels like home." Tears of happiness filled Clara's eyes as she answered, "You didn't just save my life. You gave me a reason to live it." Before winter arrived, the little church in Red Creek rang with wedding bells as the lonely rancher and the once condemned young woman began a new chapter together. Their story became a legend across the frontier, reminding everyone that a single act of compassion can change a life forever. If this touching Wild West story warmed your heart, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who believes in second chances, kindness, and the power of hope. Until next time, may kindness always find its way to you.